Hi, everyone. Good Tuesday afternoon, and welcome to GoLocal Live. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the latest in national politics. After a brief hiatus, we're welcoming back Jennifer Lawless, professor of politics at the University of Virginia, who's actually up in Boston, having just given a talk at Harvard Law School. Professor, thank you for joining us today.
Of course.
Well, of course, nationally, all eyes on the impeachment hearings. We saw the official White House Twitter account weigh into the recent developments today. So let's just give a little breakdown as to the big takeaways so far.
Well, this is day 3 of the public hearings. We started last week, and basically the Democrats are suggesting that everything is going for them exactly the way that they had hoped, that there are high-level career bureaucrats and diplomats who are not politically charged, who basically are just experts in their fields, who are saying that the entire dealings with the Ukraine were not normal and were unusual and seem to have been motivated by Donald Trump's personal political interests. The Republicans are saying that you can't listen to anything that these people are saying because the process itself is unfair, that it hasn't been open, that the witnesses are not who the Republicans would like to call, and that everything is secondhand, which is why today was particularly important, because today's cast of characters are not secondhand, or they're not offering secondhand accounts. They were actually in the room when the phone call on July 25th was made. I mean, it's hard to know whether any Republicans can demonstrate movement on this. They seem to have dug their heels in. But I do think that the overall tenor of the hearings suggests that these are witnesses who we should be taking quite seriously. They're all very thoughtful. They're all very clear in their answers to the questions, and they're doing what career bureaucrats should be doing, which is why when Donald Trump tweets that Marie Yovanovitch should sort of look out, and that she's a disgrace and that Somalia was her fault, or today when the official White House Twitter account suggests that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was not held in high regard by his boss, it's all very, very worrisome, I think, for people that care about sort of an impartial expertise that we want from our bureaucrats.
So is this just obviously the new world order, seeing the tweets, the commentary, sort of real time, that from the White House? Is there anything substantively damaging to have that be occurring? Or does the general American populace not really differentiate, what's said officially and what's said not officially?
Well, the American population might not, but I think that there are two broad implications that bear directly on American politics. The first is that the House of Representatives and the United States Senate certainly differentiate between the two, and there could very well be a violation here. That's also part of the reason why Donald Trump's tweet on Friday was so appalling to so many people. You know, that's the way that authoritarians, that's the way that dictators treat the people who they employ, and they threaten them in real time. And so that may very well have opened up a can of worms that will lead to an additional article of impeachment. The second reason that this is so important is because it's suggesting to future witnesses that they should be concerned. And that's not something that we've ever thought of when we've called people to testify. Now, the counteracting force here is that on Friday, Roger Stone was found guilty of all charges, including lying to a congressional committee. So although Donald Trump is trying to push the witnesses in a direction to sort of tell a more favorable impression of events, the Roger Stone verdict suggests that if they lie, they will get into trouble. So it might be that these two factors cancel each other out, but it's certainly setting a tone for these hearings that is meant to intimidate not only the witnesses who are speaking in real time, but also the ones who have yet to be called.
So is that what you're keeping an eye on moving forward? Again, not just the witnesses, but also clearly the reaction from the president and the White House as well.
Certainly. And the other thing that really needs to be kept an eye on is Ambassador Sondland's testimony, because he's the one witness who could potentially be treated as a sort of hostile witness by both the Democrats and the Republicans. He told one set of stories. He then realized that he had forgotten or misremembered. He needed his memory refreshed. It's unclear if for version 3 he's going to have had another eureka moment. And I don't think either side really knows what to make of him or whether he's going to be somebody who they can trust or not. So, I think that will add a dimension that we haven't seen thus far in the hearings.
So let's talk a little bit this week, foreign policy. The Trump administration saying that in a deviation from policy dating back to 1978, that the U.S. will recognize the Israeli settlements in occupied territories as legitimate. Now, question for you, wagging the dog when things get hot or in line with Trump's Israeli foreign policy?
I think in this case, both, although the timing of it is clearly wag the dog. I do think that the policy generally flies in the face of what U.S. policy has been, and it certainly makes any sort of long-term peace agreement, it jeopardizes that. Now, again, this is something that the next president could overturn. It's something that members of Congress can clearly push back against. But it does highlight that when Donald Trump makes foreign policy, Donald Trump cares about what Donald Trump thinks. And the last 40 years don't matter. Precedent doesn't matter. Congressional expertise doesn't matter. It's just what he wants to do. And so in some ways, I think that it highlights the power of the president, and that might be appealing to his base, but it's certainly bad for foreign policy.
Do we consider that the chance is very real? I know we've seen some warnings from the State Department for significant repercussions globally from this announcement.
Yes, except I think that there's also this general sense among the global community that they don't really know what to make of Donald Trump either. And so, there's this sort of wait and see mentality where I think the United States is probably not being punished the way that it would be for making some of the decisions that the president is making, because our allies are looking at us thinking, all right, this is probably short-lived, or there's going to be another president who is going to come to his senses or her senses. But that's a pretty precarious position to be in, especially when in the past we've been sort of viewed as the global leader when it comes to issues like this.
Let's talk a little bit about 2020. Of course, Pete Buttigieg looking strong in Iowa. Not necessarily so in, say, South Carolina. But I think the question is, could Pete win Iowa and then what?
He could win Iowa and fizzle. I would say that there are a couple of things to remember. The first is that this is still the phase of the presidential election where voters are playing whack-a-mole. We saw it in 2012. We saw it in 2016. Here we have a little bit more stability because we have a series of frontrunners in Biden, Warren, and Sanders who have stayed pretty consistent. But there has been a surge on the part of various other candidates along the way, and they pop up and then they get hit down. Now, it seems like Mayor Pete has a little bit more traction this time around, but he has invested an incredible amount of time and energy into Iowa, and it's unclear that a victory there would have legs. It certainly can't hurt. But this is one of those situations where if all of the investment has been in Iowa and that can't be parlayed into a victory in New Hampshire, or even more importantly, a major overperformance among African-American voters in South Carolina, then it's not obvious how he goes on to win the nomination.
Okay, impeachment hearings, keeping an eye on what's happening abroad. Of course, 2020. What else are we going to be looking at in the coming week?
So tomorrow is a huge day because you have Sondland testifying and then you have the Democratic debate. I also think the White House has been able to, over the course of the last 24 hours, ignore Donald Trump's trip to Walter Reed over the weekend. But the minute that the news cycle dies down, I think we're going to see a resurgence of interest in what that visit was really about. And again, maybe he'll engage in some foreign policy decision that will detract from that attention. But my sense is that journalists are going to be doing a lot to try and figure out what was really going on.
Well, as always, we appreciate your taking the time to Skype in, and today, as you are on the road from up at Harvard, appreciate you giving us your insights into national politics. UVA Professor of Political Science, Jennifer Lawless, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. And thank you for watching. When we pop back up in a little bit at the City Plan Commission, come join us on GoLocal Live. We'll see you then. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.